Hey everybody, I'm with my longtime friend going back to what 1991 or something like that.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
yeah, John Russo. Gesturing, and he's actually over here. So depending on how you do, it's funny how it works because depending on you're either doing this way or that way. But whatever. John is now a consultant with Synchronicity Associates.
Yeah,
And
I mean that's just me.
yeah,
I mean, it's just my corporate little corporation, and it's nothing more than my expertise and my experience for hire.
which is considerable. So
Thank you.
it's quite considerable. City manager with, well, you should have been with Oakland, really, technically. Some would argue that you were, and then you really became a city manager and went over to Alameda, and then you went to Riverside and then Irvine, and now you're now in the great area of the United States, not far from Bob Hope's home. So I'm really
That's
jealous.
correct.
Yeah, I'm so
Yeah,
really jealous, but now I'm happy for my.
lovely and beautiful Coachella Valley. We love it
Yes,
here. It's
absolutely.
101 degrees today, but it's a dry heat,
Oh my
so
lord.
very comfortable.
Let's talk something that we've always talked about: politics.
Sure.
And Donald Trump being found guilty on not one, not two, not 15, not 20, but 34 counts. Ding,
Right.
ding, 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 ding. What do you think of the verdict? And I will take it from there. Listen.
I think it was an obvious verdict. I watched a lot of the coverage every day till and looked at the transcripts as they came out. I mean, as you know, I've been a lawyer for 39 years, and
And a good
I've done
one.
a lot of I've done a lot of government law, mostly in Oakland, and I think what I saw some real errors by the defense. It's nothing that wasn't discussed on the general on the media outlets that are not pure propaganda. But every trial, lawyers will look back and say, could have done that differently, should have done that differently. It's a lot of speculation about whether or not some of those mistakes in the defense were the result of having a difficult client. Trump is known to be extremely demanding of his attorneys, and believes he knows better how to handle the strategy of a case than his attorneys, just as he believes everything that he says is smarter than what everybody else says, which, by the way, in and of itself is proof he's not that smart, because anyone who thinks that they're smart across every possible discipline, by definition, is not very bright. But yeah, I think the jury. I wasn't surprised that the jury came back so quickly. And when they asked for the rereading of the same issue from the testimony of David Pecker, and it's hard to resist. I'm going to, but that has got to be the perfect name for that guy. Um, David Pecker and Michael Cohen, as if to check to see whether these were consistent in the discussion of how they handled McDougal. Um, and pardon me, more importantly, the initial meeting where the conspiracy, at that time, the alleged conspiracy was formed. Once they asked for that, I realized, wow, they've bought the theory of the prosecution. Now they're just trying to determine whether or not there is enough consistency in somebody other than Cohen to support Cohen's testimony in that regard. And was there enough to actually show that there was a conspiracy? Once they asked for that, I was pretty sure they were going to come in and convict. I was surprised that I thought that they would convict only on the checks that he actually signed. I thought they might just go with those and then the entries that followed from those, rather than including all of them, including the checks that the two sons wrote or signed.
Mhm.
Um, but it shows that they bought in completely to the conspiracy having been fashioned at the 2015 meeting at Trump Tower. So I
Did,
wasn't that surprised when it came in.
did they look at it? Is that because they looked at it more as the Trump company as opposed to, Donald Trump himself and Donald being the ringleader?
Well, that was the theory. Yeah, I mean, I think the theory was that it first of all, the defense provided no alternative explanation for the jury to latch onto that would explain how all those things happened, how the chief financial officer cooperated with the renegade and rogue Michael Cohen when the chief financial officer had been a loyal employee for all of those years, and that all of these other friendly witnesses to Donald Trump referred to him as things like the boss and that he was a micromanager and that everything had to go through him. It became very difficult for the defense to prevail that this could have happened without him knowing and approving unless they had provided an alternative theory. And their alternative theory wasn't a theory at all. It was just, well, you can't believe Michael Cohen because everybody knows he's a liar. Well, he is. But then how did all of this happen? Because everybody else who loved Donald Trump, the Hope Hickses of the world and the David Peckers, they were all involved.
Yep.
Was it reasonable? Because it's not that the prosecution has to show beyond a reasonable doubt. It's a very high burden, but it's not beyond any possible doubt. It's a reasonable doubt. And it was not reasonable without an alternative theory. It was not reasonable to doubt that Donald Trump knew, since he was in the initial meeting on the subject matter and signed the checks, and the checks for the reimbursement that were fashioned as lawyers' fees just happened to be in the same amounts to work out a reimbursement. And there was that killer document that the chief financial officer prepared.
Alan Weisberg, right?
Weisberg, yeah. And that was what signed off. So I think the jury didn't have any choice logically but to convict. Could the defense have prepared an alternative theory? I don't know, but they seem to spend a whole lot of time slut shaming Stormy Daniels, and attacking, kind of belaboring the obvious and dramatically attacking Michael Cohen. That's all fine if you do the other piece.
Mm-hmm.
And again, whether or not he had sex with Stormy Daniels really wasn't relevant to whether there was a conspiracy to hide the hush money payment. So I thought the defense, it was like the defense was like a one-legged man. It didn't have the other leg, which was what. So then how do you explain this? What's a plausible explanation other than Michael Cohen was ticked off and wanted to get even with Donald Trump and made this all up?
Help me understand something. So you're saying to me that if Stormy Daniels and Donald Trump had some conversation and Donald Trump paid her for hush money for whatever that was, it still would have been illegal.
No. What I'm saying is whether or not
just a sex didn't matter. I'm not disagreeing.
All that matters is that she was paid
to
not tell her story, whether or not her story was true. Now, I mean, I happen to believe it was true, but in the end, honestly, we don't really know. And it doesn't matter, because whether it was true or not true, the crime was hiding the payment to her not to speak to the media about her story prior to the election. That's the crime.
And also the bottom line
is paying hush money itself is not a crime. Having sex with her would not have been a crime. So it kind of appears just, kind of where there's smoke, there's fire.
Yeah.
The fact that so much time was spent on denying that she had and Trump had been intimate, if you want to call it that, um, seems to have been something that was extrajudicial. That argument was being made to satisfy other needs that the defendant had, perhaps family, perhaps his reputation with some of his base, particularly the religious base. I don't know. But I would not, if I were doing that trial, and I confess I was never a criminal attorney, but I think it's really important you focus on what matters. And they spent a lot of time, and I think they may have distracted the jury and maybe even ticked the jury off, or a couple of members of the jury, by slut shaming her, because that was utterly unnecessary.
Do you think also that, well, let me just rephrase that question. What difference would have made if Donald Trump himself testified?
Oh, he would have had a problem. I mean, no, he would have had a problem. I mean, it's sort of similar to earlier times when Donald Trump has said he wanted to testify, or he wanted to talk to a grand jury, or he wanted to speak to a congressional committee. And let's move over as a sort of a related case. The entire nonsense about the former national security advisor, Michael.
Michael, I know you're talking about, because
Yeah.
he had
The guy who told the Russians, just back off, we're going to get rid of the sanctions,
Right.
and then lied to Pence about it.
Right.
Oh God, Flynn.
Michael Flynn, right.
Yeah,
Right.
Michael Flynn. There was this whole theme on right-wing media, led by Fox News, that Flynn was in trouble because of a perjury trap.
Mhm.
And then you heard Trump after the trial say, "Well, I wanted to testify, but if you say it's raining on a certain day when you were wrong and it was actually sunny, then you've committed perjury."
Mhm.
First of all, that's not true. You have to intend to commit perjury. It's not because you forgot something. But there's an easy way to avoid a perjury trap. You know what it is?
What's that?
Don't lie. That's it. Don't lie. If you
Easy.
don't lie, the chances of being caught in a perjury trap are absolutely infinitesimal. So I think his lawyers were concerned that if he goes on the stand, he'll perjure himself, because I don't think it's a stretch to say that while the defense team, the attorneys, called Michael Cohen the gloat. I don't know. I mean, we can have an argument about who is a better center, Will Chamberlain, Kareem. I think we have a good argument about who's a bigger gloat. Was it Michael Cohen or is it Donald Trump? And I mean, who did he learn it from? And who advantaged himself for all of Michael Cohen's lies up until 2018 or so? So I think they didn't want to put him on the stand. They were frightened he'd perjure himself. And also, yeah, it's true that he would have been opened up to a blistering cross-examination. It wouldn't have been about anything and everything in his life. That's as false as his contention that the judge wouldn't allow him to testify when he went out and said that. Now he's not saying that anymore. I mean, every day wakes up and it's an entirely new world of facts for Donald Trump. So I don't think they wanted to put him on the stand.
What about the arguments that, and this is something that I thought was fascinating, is not one, not two, but three different media outlets. And you can talk about ownership or whatever, but these outlets said to a person that they were shocked that there was a verdict, that they expected. I think one person said a hung jury, the other, so on, right? What about that? Should this have come out the way that it did? Were they right, or were they just saying something just to appear, balanced? Or maybe they're
No,
making owners happy. What's going on with that?
no, I think it's fair. I think the idea it's very difficult if you don't have a so-called smoking gun.
Hmm.
I think it is a complicated case. It's not an easy case, and I think given how polarized the country is, the idea that you would get, I mean, that's what makes the verdicts interesting, is what would it have taken for one juror to say, I'm not comfortable that this is beyond a reasonable doubt. I think there's some doubt here because we don't have him actually saying it.
Hmm.
We don't have a document where he actually did it. He signed the checks, but there's sufficient testimony that he signed a lot of checks barely looking at them. The only person who can put him, meaning Trump, put him in the conspiracy to go do the payment to Stormy Daniels is a convicted perjurer. The idea that I think it was fair to think that there would be at least one holdout. I don't think anyone, not even the Trump legal team, from what I understand, I don't think anyone expected an acquittal. But I wouldn't have been surprised that there'd be a hung jury. Look at where the country is. We can't agree on whether it's day or night. We can't agree on whether vaccines are good. We can't agree on when the earth was formed. We don't agree on science. Why would we agree on the inference that was necessary in order to convict Trump on this, that 12 people would hear this really complicated 6 weeks of evidence and come back within 2 days and say, okay, yeah, you know what? He did it. I think he did it.
Hmm.
But as an attorney, it is, I mean, I think it's the right verdict, but I think it's surprising. I don't think that was part of having media outlets try to pretend they're balanced. I think that's a fair analysis. I've been telling my friends and my family that I thought it would be a hung jury.
So we talk law, and let's kind of walk over like a TV show into order. Uh, there are people who, well, the sentencing is coming up on July 11th.
Mhm.
Does he go to jail or not?
Yeah, it's true. Sorry, does he go to jail?
Yeah.
Well, he does. First of all, whatever sentence he gets, it's going to be this judge, because this judge appears to be extremely cautious. This judge is going to hold it in abeyance pending appeal. He's gonna let him appeal. He's not going to have him, if he were to give him house arrest or prison or a fine, any of it. He's gonna hold it in abeyance pending appeal. And that's
Uh,
the right thing to do because this is such an important case. Um, I mean, does it prove that there's a two-tiered system of justice? Yeah, and it favors people with a lot of money, like Donald Trump. But it is a case of first impression, not just because it's a former president, but the case itself is a case of first impression, which is, can New York state law and a violation of New York state law be bootstrapped by a New York court to prohibit and punish what effectively was a violation of federal law? So it's never been done before. And the idea that it's never been done
we get
before.
too far down that direction. Explain, for example, Seth Henderson here, who's one of our vloggers, what it means to bootstrap, because then he says, I don't think it makes it past the appellate court. We'll see what Ninth Circuit decides. Opine on both of those. First of all, what does bootstrap mean? That's not opine, that's a
Well,
statement.
it means that, well, because the New York law says it's broad and it talks about, an illegal act. It doesn't say an illegal act under New York law. It's an illegal act. So now you've got a New York law that has been violated because the illegal act was federal. It was a violation of campaign finance.
Mhm.
Just to be clear, this is not going to the Ninth Circuit. The Ninth Circuit is California, and it's not going to the Second Circuit, which is New York's, the New York Circuit. This is going to what's called the appellate division, and I think it's first appellate. Now, I'm not a New York lawyer, even though I went to law school there and grew up there, but I'm pretty sure Manhattan is first appellate district.
Mhm.
In New York, it's a little confusing.
Actually, you're right. You're right. You're right. And
Yeah.
that's only from my paying attention to other cases. But yeah, you're right.
Yeah. It's a state law appeals court. Ninth Circuit is a federal appeals court.
Mhm.
It's going to go to the appellate division, New York State. What's confusing is that in New York, the trial courts are called the Supreme Court.
Hmm.
So the appeals court, the first one, is the appellate division, and then if it gets past that, which it certainly will, it will go to the New York State, what's called the Court of Appeals. And that's the equivalent of the California Supreme Court, the Nevada Supreme Court. That's the Supreme Court. An interesting question would be, if Trump loses at the New York Court of Appeals, would the Supreme Court take, certainly Trump's lawyers would, and so would any good lawyer, they would try to get the Supreme Court to come in to say, how can a New York court be adjudicating under New York law something that's a federal crime?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But what I think is an interesting aspect that may come up here is, in the 20th century, you would have said the Supreme Court will never take that case because it's a New York law case. But Bush versus Gore.
Yep, Florida.
Where the Supreme Court stepped in and overruled Florida's Supreme Court on an issue of Florida law about the recount. Now, of course, the Supreme Court at that time, in a highly partisan decision, also said, this case has no precedential value. It's never to be used again. But that's not true.
Right.
And they knew it when they said it.
Isn't that a contradiction? Because they deal with national issues in the presidency, essentially. But then to come up with that, doesn't that make your head spin?
No, I read it at the time. We probably talked about it back then. Yeah. I read the case of Bush versus Gore as crossing a Rubicon.
Actually,
the Supreme Court decided the election and overturned the Supreme Court of the state where the election was held, because if you have the Electoral College, then the Supreme Court of that, as long as they're not violating one man, one vote, Voter Rights Act sort of personal rights, right? As long as they're not violating a federal right, I don't see how the Supreme Court had jurisdiction to do that. But they took jurisdiction very clearly. That's why Al Gore, I think, did exactly the right thing. He said, I totally disagree with this decision, but this is our system. I accept it. I'm just here to tell you that was the beginning of that. I believe that was the beginning of the end of the Supreme Court.
Yeah. I don't think we talked about that on YouTube. YouTube actually wasn't even created until 2005, and my channel, April 2006. So we were full. Yeah, so we didn't get a chance.
Well, I'm saying you and I maybe talked about it just as friends hanging around Oakland at the time, because I spoke at rallies about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Right, absolutely.
That's back when I was young and active and doing that sort of thing.
Now you're still young and active.
I may be active, I'm not young. I have a Medicare card. Come on.
Oh, well, hey, you know.
It's great.
It's like I should get one of those. That's a good idea. I'll be 60.
You gotta be 65. You can't get one yet. You're too young. 65. You got to wait. You're a whippersnapper yet. Young whippersnapper.
Damn. Doggone it, man. Just trying to push everything forward a bit. Nah, just kidding. Sort of. Anyway, does this gain Donald Trump the presidency?
No.
Why?
Because the people that love him still love him. Maybe they love him more. The people who want, I'm going to make a prediction for you later that I want you to hold me to, because it's a 20-year time horizon, probably.
Sure.
There's been really developing over particularly the past 5 years, this really, I think it's just nuts. This crazy idea that Donald Trump is a Christ figure and a martyr, So when he says, I'm doing this because they would do it for you, it's basically he's suffering for everyone else's sins, is what he's trying to do. He's, I think he understands that he's doing that. And so you look on in, sort of the crazy internet world, which is kind of like, for those who watch Stranger Things, it's kind of like the Upside Down. Um, when you look in there, there have been memes, where they have Jesus laying, and by the way, he's always a very white and blonde Jesus, and he's got his hands on Donald Trump, and Donald Trump is like very humble, which we've never once seen him in that pose. He's very humble, and Jesus, and it's, Father, please lay your hands on him, and it's kind of mind blowing. And so for those people, this continues that quasi, for me, it's clearly a heretical narrative. If you are a real Christian, this is a heretical narrative. But okay, whatever, but it continues in that vein. But in the end, he doesn't gain votes because of this, and probably he loses some votes because of this. And you can amp up the intensity of a particular voter so that they go from being rabid to becoming completely bonkers, but it's still one vote. And the issue here remains.
No, absolutely not. I mean,
sorry, John, I did something. I'm holding that for you. I'll get your reaction. I didn't mean to do that, but go ahead. Keep your point.
Yeah, I mean, the really the issue here is, how does it impact those people who are saying, well, I don't think Biden's such a great president, and I don't want to vote for him again. And have you seen the price of eggs? And these people are saying that Trump is going to be a dictator, but I like omelets. Those people might be more inclined now to say, do I really want, isn't it time to change the channel? I've been watching this telenovela of Donald Trump. I've been watching this variation on Breaking Bad and The Sopranos, where it's basically, he's a bad guy, but gosh, he's such a rogue. And how long can he get away with this? At a certain point, I don't think it's Trump that Trump derangement that gets people off of Trump. I think it's Trump exhaustion. I think it's like, okay, it's time to change the channel.
On that note, Seth says or writes, people make the same memes about Biden. Both sides, Democrat and Republican, are out of control with the finger pointing. How does Biden gain votes from this lawfare? I think he writes.
You know what that is? Hi there. Lawfare is the false concept that Biden directed this lawsuit. There's absolutely no evidence for that whatsoever. And if, in fact, Biden had weaponized the Justice Department, why are they prosecuting a Democratic senator in New Jersey, a Democratic congressman in Texas, and the president's son? So this lawfare is actually an excuse, because so much of what Trumpism is about projection, that you claim the other side is doing what you want to do so you can justify it. This is to justify Trump's stated intention to take revenge on his political enemies if he gains the White House again, and to use the Justice Department expressly to do that. Now, having said that, there are a lot of silly memes out there on both sides, but I'm not into this, both sides suck business. I don't think we have the luxury, given that we actually are facing a guy who wishes he were the king and above the law.
Yeah,
and
I agree.
We do know he kept documents intentionally. Why? No one's done that before. I mean, you say, oh, Biden had documents and he was the vice president. How did he? Yeah, whatever. When they found he had some documents, immediately give them back. Why did Trump not want to give the documents back? Why did he claim they were his, unless he thought he's effectively the king? They're my documents. They're not the people's documents. That's Donald Trump. Donald Trump wants to be king. I mean, that's really, may not take the title, right? I mean, Octavian, the first emperor of Rome, styled himself not as an emperor. He didn't call himself emperor, but he still was the first emperor of Rome. He was still above the law.
Yep. Yeah. How does this fit in? And I just am happy I remembered to do this with the power narrative from your position as a New Yorker who's been a fan of Robert Caro, who can talk about Fior de la Guardia, who can wax eloquently about New York in the 70s. I can go on and on and on about your history as a New Yorker and how you've communicated New York culture through my relationship with you over the decades. I can say that. Having said all that, where did Donald Trump for you go wrong, or was he always wrong? Because we never really talked about Donald Trump back then much until The Apprentice came on, but even then it wasn't, an extensive talk.
No, for New Yorkers, Donald Trump was a blowhard joke. It's a joke. Look, the Trump fortune was built on white panic. You weren't, they were sued. Joe Biden didn't do it. And by the way, let me just go back for a second on the lawfare thing. This idea about Joe Biden, I'm confused. On the one hand, he's addled and a complete idiot and can't put a sentence together. And on the other hand, he's a freaking mastermind.
Right.
Go figure.
Yeah.
He's whatever you want him to be at any time. That's brilliant.
Or maybe he's schizophrenic.
I don't know. Maybe. But with Donald Trump, his father, they made their money in the outer boroughs creating apartment buildings where people knew they wouldn't have to live next door to a black family or a Puerto Rican family.
Yep.
That's where they made their money. They were sued and they had to settle with the federal government back in the 1970s. And by the way, that case was not brought by a Democratic administration. And for years, Donald Trump gave money. He says, I gave money to everybody, but he was in New York. So he mostly was giving money to Democrats.
Mm-hmm.
That's the reality. And if you watch any of his interviews when he was younger, he's pretty much in line with Democratic Party ideology, except when something would happen that had a racial dimension, he was always there on what I believe was the wrong side of the ball. And the Central Park 5 case is a major example.
Absolutely.
But the Central Park 5 thing wasn't as important as there was a headline on the New York Post that was attributed to his second wife, Marla Maples, with whom he was cheating on his first wife, Ivana Trump. And the headline said, which to this day we laugh about in my house, it was a big headline that said, "Best sex I ever had." And supposedly Marla Maples said it, but it comes out years later that Trump would call the newspapers and try to disguise his voice and claim that he was a PR guy for Donald Trump and that everybody should know that she had said, "Wow, this is the best sex I ever had." I mean, who does that? I mean, who is so insecure and wants to, it's just kind of, so for us, it was like Donald Trump, he craps in a gold toilet. Who does that? Whose ego is so fragile that they need that? So, for most New York, when Zennie, somebody in 2011 or 12 was at a dinner at my house. Now, I have friends of all stripes in terms of political positions.
Oh, yeah.
I have dear friends who are Republicans, and I have dear friends who are MAGA. And I'm not going to not be friends with them just because I disagree with them pretty severely.
Right.
As long as they don't go out and, go storm the Capitol. If any of them were to do something like that, then you're not my friend anymore because you're a traitor.
Right.
But people are entitled to different opinions and you're entitled to comment on them. I'm at a dinner at my house in 2011 or 2012 with a group of predominantly Republicans. And this one woman says, "Oh, I wish Donald Trump would run for president." And the entire table of 12 people, 11 people, other than her, the entire table was like, "Oh, what? Donald Trump? Are you kidding?" And, she could have said, "Why don't we have Bozo the Clown or Jerry Lewis as president?" I mean, to me, he was a comic figure. And I can tell you, he was a comic figure to a lot of people. He did a couple of buildings. He did the hotel over the top of Grand Central. He did come in, although there's questions about how the money got spent. But okay, it's development; it happens. He did save the ice rink in Central Park. He did build Trump Tower, although it's gaudy and kind of gross. He's a developer. New York developers are brash. I don't blame him for being brash and bragging. Right. That's not what I would do, but that's a developer in New York. There's a lot like him. The problem Donald Trump had was he was never
New Jersey Generals, right?
Look at what he did. He bought the New Jersey Generals with an eye toward bringing an antitrust lawsuit against the NFL. He knew they were going to lose money.
Right.
And his first goal was to get the other owners to sue the NFL. And they won. And what did they get? $1 is what the jury gave them. $1.
Yep.
I mean, what is funny, and you mentioned The Apprentice, is the role The Apprentice played in fashioning his, and really rehabilitating his reputation, because he had a good reputation, deserved or not, in the 80s. But the guy stiffed everybody. I mean, he cheated on everybody. He cheated his investors. He cheated the banks. He cheated his contractors. He cheated on his wife. Apparently, he cheats at golf.
Yeah.
That's who he is.
Yeah. And I have to say, John, I bought that because I tried out to be on The Apprentice. I don't know if I ever told you that.
Well, okay.
And I didn't make it. I was dressed with a nice suit. But to be absolutely candid, the two young women that were evaluating us selected these two hick-looking guys who were white over me, and I looked like I should be on The Apprentice. I was steaming. I tried to get in touch with Donald Trump. I tried to track him down when I was in New York for the draft and everything else, right? Because to me, what he represented and would put a focus on was, starting a business, or we call it a startup, the good life, of course, all that was positive about New York. And at that time, you have to remember, the internet wasn't really in its full flowering like it is today.
Right. Yeah.
We didn't know the real Donald Trump for the most part, like a number of people. And, to wit, I have a book called, I have The Art of the Deal. Now that some people call it The Art of the Deal, right? I have it on my bookshelf to this day.
Right.
Because,
which he didn't write, by the way.
I'm sorry?
Which he did not write.
Right, but he didn't write it.
Although it's not unusual for celebrities to hire writers.
Yeah.
I'm not knocking that. I'm just noting he didn't write it.
Yeah, and so when I was at 21, what did I do? I was put next to his father, Fred Trump's seat, and I made a video about it, and I tagged Donald on what was the then new Twitter. And I was really proud of where I was headed and everything else. I mean, it was a motivating factor for me. And, I just put that out. I mean, when I think of him, I don't think of all this other stuff. I think of Elaine's, which closed. I think of 21, which should be reopened. I think of I think of a good part of American culture that died. Now, do we stick that part of American culture with Donald Trump exclusively? Of course not. But that's where I came into it for myself.
He came into vision in the late 70s, early 80s, when New York was still having a bad time, but the financial markets had created a boom, and the Koch administration had passed some tax write-off legislation that allowed developers to start redeveloping places like Soho, Tribeca, all of which turned out to be fine. It's easy to conflate that with the greed is good ethos of that era,
right? From in Wall Street, right?
Yeah,
Right.
But Donald Trump, I think to most New Yorkers, we kind of thought, yeah, because he was like a gossip column denizen. He was always on page 6, and he clearly managed that image. He, like people talk about, we need a business guy or a business person to be president. That'll clean up the government. Well, there's problems with that. But, you could theoretically, a CEO, a Jack Walsh, a Lee Iacocca, you could make an argument that someone running a big sprawling corporation would be able to bring those skills, that juggling, to a big giant organization like the United States federal government. Really, what Trump's business became after his 4 bankruptcies is a branding.
Yeah.
It was image creation and slapping your logo and your brand on somebody else's project and taking a piece of it because it represented luxury. It represented guilt, G-I-L-T, not G-U-I-L-T. It represented that kind of lifestyle that you're talking about. And he was brilliant at doing that, and he has tremendous message discipline. Anyone who thinks Donald Trump is stupid, it really isn't getting it.
No, he's not stupid.
He doesn't know a lot, but what he knows, he is disciplined in maintaining it, and he's been just over the top successful with it. Now, the fact that it's all kind of built on kind of like a Potemkin village instead of a real city of ideas and talent, and that it's still a very pretty little, veneer that gets created. But, I think by any objective measure, he was a tremendous failure in business. If he had taken the money Fred, his father, had given him and put it in a Christmas club, for God's sake, he'd probably have more money now than he does. There's a reason he doesn't want how much he's worth to get out, because he's never been worth what he said he was worth. And, he said, well, I never went bankrupt privately. Okay, great. But, pretty much everything you created failed.
You touched on something I want to pick up before I have to close out. Your time.
Me too. I got to close out. Sorry.
Right, but I know my time is yours. But I'll think the bottom of the hour. But my whole point is that my question rather is that I ran across an article in 2012 which reported a 2008 speech that Trump gave to a group of Russian businessmen. They went over Russian orbit, and
I think it was Donald, not Eric. It was Donald Jr.
It was Donald Jr. But my point is that launched Trump Russia, and I don't specifically know what happened. There's the whole golden shower reports and everything, but it looks to me like he went over there to get a huge amount of money to pay off his debts that were U.S. born and get additional cash infusion for his worldwide ambitions. But it seems like he, and I'm theorizing here, made a trade-off in that whoever gave him the money said, okay, you have to run for president and we're going to get you there. We're going to use our new approach to the internet, manipulate social media. I actually have one of the proposals by Cy. And much of what I'm saying to you was, to a degree, corroborated in my interview with Trump deputy campaign manager Rick Gates. I've had him on 3 times. We talked quite a bit. So what about that? Was that the change in Trump that created the Trump today, which arguably is a monster?
I'd be purely speculating to do that.
Yeah, sure.
And I don't know. What I do know is after he stiffed most all of the American major banks, he needed to go offshore in order to raise capital. There were a large number of his condos that he had built in various projects that were purchased by the so-called oligarchs, who were really the underbosses. That's that the Russian the Russian government and the Russian elite really is best understood, where Putin is the godfather and they have a bunch of underbosses, right? Because like even right now, he's got a guy who has no military experience running the military. How you do that? Okay. So
right.
pardon me if I sneeze. But I think that there's no doubt that Donald Trump Jr.'s comment about, we're involved with a lot of capital with the Russians is something that's interesting to look at, given what happened, the clear, according to the United States intelligence community, the clear interference by the Russians in the 2016 election. The fact that there was the revelation about Clinton's campaign emails came right on the heels of the Access Hollywood tape. The meeting at Trump Tower between a delegated agent of the Russian government with Donald Trump Jr. and members of the campaign team in Trump Tower.
Yep.
All of those are very interesting dots. And one of the things that Trump did pretty brilliantly was when the Mueller report came out, he had Bill Barr come out immediately and say, this exonerates him. There's nothing here. That's not what the Mueller report said. What the Mueller report said was, they've obstructed justice. I can't get the documentation to show whether there's something here. So we really don't know. I'm not prepared to say, certainly not in a public setting like this, I would not be prepared to say, yeah, and that means he is a knowing Russian agent and a deal was made. Do I think, on the other hand, given the Russian infiltration of the NRA, given the Russian infiltration into the politics of most of the Western European democracies, as well as the US, given the nature of how the Russian government and that group of capos and underbosses works, do I think Trump has acted, given his unwillingness to ever criticize Putin or to take a strong stand in this nonsense that was done with the GOP House members on Ukraine? Do I think that Trump and the MAGA movement has been at best an unwitting agent, an asset of, and I use the term intentionally here, I'm not making a mistake, that they are at a minimum assets, or what they used to call useful idiots of the Soviet Union, because what this is about is restructuring and recreating the Soviet Union and the Warsaw Pact. That's what Putin is after. And that's, I mean, it makes total, geopolitical sense that that's what he's trying to do. It's the wrong approach, but I think, for his country, but hey, he's in charge and they keep him there. So, so I think there's a lot of dots. I don't think we can or should or need to connect them to realize that this love affair that the MAGA party has developed with Imperial Russia is antithetical to United States and democratic small d interests. So I don't need to go there. I mean, if it happened, it happened. What are you going to do?
I want to get your opinion on this before we skedaddle, because it's disturbing. Yeah. Okay, here we go.
No, absolutely not. I mean, everything I said is correct. It's how the American people feel. It's what we know to be a fact. It's all the evidence has been proven true. We have Jamie Raskin in there accusing us of worshiping Trump, worshiping as a convicted felon. Well, yeah, so is George Floyd. And everybody, and you all too, the media worship George Floyd. Democrats worship George Floyd. There were riots burning down the fucking country over George Floyd, and Raskin is in there saying we worship him. Excuse me, let me correct you, and this is really important. I don't worship, I worship God. God. And Jesus is my savior. I don't worship President Trump. And I'm really sick and tired of the bullshit annex I have to deal with constantly from the Democrats. So that's what we just went through in there. And then they're sitting there, they can attack my character all day long. What's his face in there? Whoever was talking last was calling me insane. But yet we can't say, oh, they're attacking my character. Oh no, it's nonstop BS and annex. You want to know why? The Democrats don't have anything. They're responsible for the lockdowns, forced vaccinations, kids being forced to stay home, people committing suicide, and all the horrors that this country lived through during COVID. Fauci belongs in prison. He should be tried for mass murder, and he should be tried for crimes against humanity.
What about that, John?
What do you want me to say? I mean, she's America's Karen. Look, you know, there's a great old political cliche, right? Which says, you know, don't ever get into a fight with a pig, because all that's going to happen is you're going to get muddy, and the pig likes it. I don't have anything to say about her. I mean, the only thing I can say about her is that in a House of Representatives filled with clowns, people of less than average intelligence, she still manages to stand out. I don't know. I mean, do you want me to try to dissect it? Clearly, she to bring up George Floyd in that context tells you something about her. I don't think you of all people need me to tell you what that means. She's a QAnon adherent originally.
Yep.
I think it's sad because I don't think she's alone. I think there are a lot of people who have given up on truth and have given up on facts, have given up on reason. And okay, I mean, but her people, you know, her constituency they have voted her in a couple of times now, and apparently she's safe in that seat. So you know, rather than worry about her, because she's kind of dumb and hateful, she's clearly a very angry person. But you know, in some ways, she's actually a real gift to the Democratic Party. She doesn't intend to be, but she's a gift, and she creates chaos within the Republican caucus. So she's a problem not for the Democrats; she's a problem for the Republicans. So I don't know. I mean, obviously, you want me to use, you know, the term that she's clearly, you know, what are you going to do?
Real quick, can Biden effectively run the country, even though, as Seth claims, he wasn't prosecuted for taking home documents due to poor memory?
Yeah, whatever. Okay. I mean, it's people that are voting, they're voting for America First policies and against woke policies. Okay, sure. Can you tell me? Tell me what's an America First policy?
Good question.
Is giving over Ukraine and allowing the Russian Empire to walk into Eastern Europe? Is that America First? I don't see how that's America First.
No, allowing Russia to
be foolish and short-sighted.
Right.
And woke? What's woke?
Well,
I don't even know. I don't even understand anymore. Woke seems to have become this broad term for anything I don't like. Now,
right.
Is there a lot of silly stuff going on in some of the academy and colleges and universities where people say really dumb stuff and believe really dumb stuff and are elitist and out of touch? Absolutely. So what? You know, there've always been silly people on both sides. That's not what this is about.
John,
I don't understand what woke is. I mean, what's woke? I don't get it. It's just so strange to me.
Question: What is woke? That is a very good question. What is woke?
What does that mean?
Let's see if there's a quick definition of it I can find here under Google. WOKE meaning.
It goes anything that makes me feel uncomfortable and that I don't like.
Oh, here it is. The original definition, according to Wikipedia, is a political slang derived from African American Vernacular English, or AAVE. Never heard of it.
Mhm.
I'm African American, meaning alertness to racial prejudice and discrimination. Beginning in the 2010s, it carried to encompass a broader awareness of social inequalities such as racial injustice, sexism, and denial of LGBTQ rights.
Well, yeah. I mean, look, if I do have to go. It is I've got a call I'm supposed to be doing, but it's like this. You know, I have a relative who lives with me who watches Fox News all day long, and he once asked, "Well, what is critical race theory?" And I said, "It's another word for the truth. It's the truth of what happened. It's not a condemnation of people today necessarily. It's you understand your history, and you understand that every country has good things in their past and very bad things in their past. That's the human experience. So the idea that it's somehow a sin and unpatriotic to learn American history is bizarre to me. You love the country just like we love our relatives.
Right.
You have for theoretically you have an uncle, and he comes in because he's older and he says stupid stuff. Well, you love him anyway.
Yep.
And how do you make things better? How do you know where you're going if you don't know where you started and you don't know what road you're on?
Well said.
So, anyway, I got to go.
Thank you, sir. Hey, everybody. We'll be back later talking about the NFL. That ends. Thank you. Hey, you got it.